Welcome back to the Reading by Candlelight Book Club at Molly's Cottage. I'm here with Darcy Tindale, the author of Burning Mountain, which features in the May Crime and Thriller book box. Welcome, Darcy. It's so lovely to have you here with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, before we begin, I'm going to tell you a little about Darcy. Besides being the author of 2 novels, she is also an actor, theatre sports player, drama teacher, director, has appeared in television commercials, film, and stage. She's written comedy for radio, for stage, for media personalities and comedians. Her short stories, plays, and poems have been published in anthologies, journals, and magazines. And her debut, The Fall Between, which is the first in her Detective Giles, is it Giles or Giles?
It's Giles.
Giles series, was published in 2023 and shortlisted for the David Awards and the Ned Kelly Awards. Burning Mountain is her second novel, but I have no idea where she found the time to write it because you must be so busy with so many strings to your bow, Darcy.
I am busy. And then someone had a go at me and went, "Oh, I was really hoping Burning Mountain was going to come out a little bit earlier." And they were like, "Why did it take so long?" And I said, "I have just finished directing 530 kids on the stage at the State Theatre." And I said, and they went, "Oh, oh," and I was like, I had my cup was full. And but yeah, it's a thrill that now it's out. But I do I keep myself busy, and but I think it's one of those things that they're all in the creative field. So everything that you do, whether it's acting or directing or playwriting, or even writing novels and crime, every little bit of those elements is like exercising your creative muscle. And so I think I'm always on. And so and then I love the when I have a break, I break, and I do nothing. I'm a sloth. And then just hit the recharge, and then I come back and hit the ground running again.
Amazing. You sound like you have such an exciting and full life.
Thank you.
Now, the most important fact about Darcy, one that she doesn't even know, is that she and I actually have something very special in common. When we were 14 years old, we both read the same book and developed a huge teenage crush on its protagonist. And that book was The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. And of course, the character was Ponyboy Curtis.
I loved Pony Boy. I think every girl crushed on him. And I think the biggest thing when I read The Outsiders was it was the first time I moved into a completely different realm of reading. And I think I found it's one of those things. I think when readers find your genre and you find your author and you find that voice that is speaking to you, you're off and running. And I think I read The Outsiders about 3 times when I was in high school because I just wanted to go back to it. Always stay gold, Pony Boy. And so I remember, and the other book, which makes me laugh because I never had to read it for school, and I remember just reading it. And when I talk to students, they hate it, and that's Lord of the Flies.
Oh, yes.
I loved Lord of the Flies, and I'm so disappointed when I talk to students. They go, ah. And they studied it to death. They picked it apart, and I'm like, no, it was, Ralph, and kill
Yes.
the beast. I stole up on the pig. And they paint their face with.
Yes, I read that. I read that in high. Well, I had to do it in high school, and I love that book too. And I love the movie. It was
Yeah,
so graphic. I don't know, like they made us watch it like we were in year 9 or something, and it was a terrifying movie to watch.
and I think the Sydney Theatre Company even put on the play and that. But I think that's it with the book. I just recently read Limberlost, and
Oh, yeah.
which isn't a crime book. It's just a beautiful literary book. And I tell the story that I finished reading Limberlost, and about a week after reading it, I was sitting at the traffic lights, and while I was waiting for the lights to change, I had this fleeting thought through my head, and I thought, "Gee, I hope that family's doing okay." And then I went, they're fine. They're fictitious. Like you don't you don't have to worry about them. And I thought that book, it gave me the feels. A week afterwards, I was angsting that, have they gotten on in life, and are they doing okay? And I think that clearly that book, resonated with me and touched me. And I think that's when you've read a good book.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And they stay with you. They stay with you forever. Now, Darcy, do you think you could give us a quick spoiler-free pitch of Burning Mountain?
Yeah, sure. So Burning Mountain is the second book in the Rebecca Giles series. And Rebecca's got a fresh new case. A skull has been found on the mountain of Mount Wisgen, and which is about 10 kilometers from Burning Mountain. And the story is that five kids hiked up Burning Mountain to have a look at the lookout. And at the top of the mountain, they had a little bit of a falling out, and Oliver took off. And when the four reached the bottom of the mountain, Oliver was nowhere to be seen. 18 years later, a bushwalker and his dog finds the skull, and Rebecca thinks this is the skull of missing Oliver Levine. And when she talks to her father about it, who's a retired police officer, it was actually his case and he was never able to solve it. So the two of them kind of grapple with their own theories, and they start to unravel, what actually went on behind, leading up to Oliver and his friends hiking, and what happened afterwards.
Yes, I love the dynamic between her and her father. It's excellently done. It's such a good relationship too. Now, this is the second book with Rebecca as your protagonist, and readers don't have to read your first book, The Fall Between, before reading this, do they?
No, so the fall between is when she first arrives at Muswellbrook, and she has a completely separate case. And then this is around about 12 months later. She's investigating her second homicide, but you sort of reintroduced to all the characters again, and you look at, not that it's repeating the fall between, but you're looking at these characters now from a different lens. And Rebecca's a little bit wiser, a little bit smarter. She's a little bit more settled in the town now, and it's a fresh case. And the reactions of her crimes team is a different perspective. So the reader gets even more of the characters that are involved and everything, but you don't need to, it's not a direct follow on at all.
Yeah, it's such a tricky skill to pull off as a writer, and you've done it beautifully. So I think that, but I would recommend to listeners that they do read The Fall Between at some point, because best-selling crime author Candice Fox referred to it as rural noir at its very best. And who's going to argue with Candice? Not me. I think you should get that quote printed on a t-shirt and just wear it everywhere.
Yeah, I should. But I love Canvas. I definitely, I remember the first time I ever met Candace Fox. I had to not fangirl myself because I had read her books. She was what I aspired, and then the next minute I was sitting next to her, and I was like, this is an author's dream. Not only being published, but being right along the side of your idols that you read and inspired for, and there you are. So
That's amazing. And Candice is very generous
yeah.
with new authors and with just people who are writing, and she gives a lot of herself, and she's so tall.
Yes. And
I had a photo with her. I swear I come up to her waist.
I'm going to go back, and I've got some standy photos as well. So the other person that is, there are some tall authors out there. I don't know. I'm a short author, but Jack Heath is probably the tallest author I've come across, and Chris Hammer's tall. So
Oh, he is tall. Yes.
always like everyone's shoulders are about here, and I do look like the fangirl stuck in amongst all these
I love that.
tall authors.
What was the seed of inspiration for this story? How did it begin for you?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Question. I went hiking with my dad up to the top of Burning Mountain, and Burning Mountain is a real place. It's in the Upper Hunter Valley, and there's a coal seam that runs through the mountain. And about 6,000 years ago, it was hit by a lightning bolt, and it's been on fire ever since. So it's smoldering. The ground is a cooked pink. It's white and ashy. It smells of sulfur. And the trees around, the roots of the trees are being cooked. So they're like these skeletal trees, and it's a very creepy, eerie kind of atmosphere. I was with my dad, and I said, this is a great location to commit a crime. He looked at me and was like, oh. And then I thought, this is also a great title for a novel as well. So I think I got the location first. I was locked in on the location. And but I wanted to really look at different themes of, do you really know someone, and what we project on other people. So I liked the idea. I love the butterfly effect. I love the domino effect. I like the thing where the actions that we do, that we don't, whether we intentionally set out to do something or unintentionally set out, that the ripple effect of, that's my dog having a shake in the background, the ripple effect of what we do and how it affects. And I did set myself up with a hard task. I have my characters when they're children, and the actions of their childhood, but how it developed and created the people they are today, and the ramifications and the consequences of these actions, and how they've molded the life that they live, and the way people perceive them. But I was talking to an author, and I disagreed with her at the beginning, and I was like, I don't think that's true. And she said to me, you never really know what kind of book you've written until you get to the last chapter and the last line. And I thought,
Oh,
I know. And I actually thought, is that true? That can't be true. Because I was thinking, I know what book I'm writing, and I know what themes I'm looking at. And I don't shove it down the reader, but I drop them in, and I think if the reader picks that up, that's brilliant. And if they don't, that's fine as well, as long as they get a good story. But I got to the end of Burning Mountain, and I went, oh, I think I've written a love story. and and it was kind of like a weird love story, because it's the love of a father and a daughter, and a love of couples, and lovers of mothers and their children, and lovers, of friendships, so the things that we do for friends and stuff. And I thought it's interesting, because sometimes we can do things that look really cruel or mean or selfish or hurtful, but we're actually doing it out of an act of love. And so I got to the end of it, and I looked at all the relationship dynamics in it, and I thought, oh, it's a very obscure love story, in a way, of the things that we do to protect those that we love, and the sacrifices that we make, and the risks that and how it comes off. So I thought, at the time, I was looking at that author going, nah, but now I'm like, yeah. I'm like,
I love I love that you call it a love story. That's a beautiful way of looking at it, because I mean, to start with, I was fascinated that Burning Mountain was an actual place. I need to go and see it now that I've read about it, because I think that it sounds fascinating. And you created such a vivid sense of it, and I suppose going to see it really helped, create that background. But one of the things that you mentioned about like creating the characters and having full stories for them, is that where you start? So you said that this time you started with the setting, but is the next thing you do like flesh out your characters before you start writing about them, or do they become fleshed out as you write?
I think, yeah, that's a good question too. I'm a plotter. I'm not much of a pantser. I feel like whenever I pants, my story meanders and weaves and goes from one direction to another, and then I doesn't really have a purpose. Where I plot, but loosely plot. So I know what, each step in the, my dog just wants her 15 minutes of fame, I think. um
That's all right. Everyone's going to love you. Everybody who's watching this. That is a gorgeous dog, and everyone that's listening should look on YouTube, because there is a gorgeous dog.
yeah. So I plot, and I know where my characters need to go. But I think because of my writing is is influenced by my acting. And I find with acting, when we go into a scene as actors, the first thing we ask ourselves is, what does my character want? And we have a scene objective. And whenever I sit down to write a book, in every scene, I think, what do my characters want? What is their objective? What are they trying to get? And if they don't want anything, if they don't have a motivation, if they're not striving for something, then that chapter should never be written, because then it becomes filler. And I've always said to people when they want to write crime or a really intense book, I go back and watch your Shakespeare. That, like, if you're not a big reader of Shakespeare, don't read it, don't try to read it, go watch the movie. And I say, go look at Othello, go look at Macbeth, go look at Hamlet. And every single character, they're really not secondary characters. Every character that comes into a scene of a Shakespeare tragedy has their own wants, their own desires, their own motivations, their own goals, their own things that they lust after, their own flaws, and they're very much a character in themselves. And by coming in with their own needs and desires, they bounce into your main character and keep pushing the story until you get to the grand final and, the climax of the story. And it all makes logic, because this person manipulated, this person lusted, this person, confused, this person broke their heart, this person, deceived them and made them do that. So I always say, don't never write a secondary character. Write a full-fledged character that needs something, that has desires and needs and wants. And another inspiration is, I love the playwright Richard O'Brien, and everyone goes, I don't know who Richard O'Brien is, and I'm like, yeah, we all do. And it's a Rocky Horror Picture Show. Let's do the time warp again. And when he was out of work, he was a musical theatre performer, and it was London and it was winter, and he thought, I'm just going to write a play. And he loved B-grade horror movies and sci-fi, and he wrote a play where he wanted every single actor who got a role in this play to love their part, and have such a unique character with their own idiosyncrasies and their own desires and wants and personality and quirks and that. And it's true. Any actor in the Rocky Horror Picture Show just loves their character, and they step out on stage. So when I finished the Burning Mountain, one of my acting friends rang me and said, if they ever make a movie of it, can I audition for Carol? And I said, Carol is in 3 chapters. That's it. That's 3 scenes. But she is such a presence, and she's there with such a purpose and such a force, and she's such a character that in 3 chapters she's become so memorable and, so lovable and quirky in her own little way. So I think I think of my plot, but then I think if you've got really fleshed out characters, your characters is what makes your scene so interesting, the way they act and interact and talk to each other, that they bring the scene alive. The setting brings the scene alive. That's your backdrop. I think I direct a lot, where I'm like, what's my backdrop? What's my lighting? What's my ambient sound? And how do my characters interact? And I also think with directing, you never have talking heads on stage, where 2 people just talking back and forth, because the audience gets bored. So I make them have action or doings, and whether or not they're making coffee, or Giles is searching for the Tim Tams in the kitchen, and another detective, because she can't find them, and he's like, you're not much of a detective, are you? So it's little, like, moments that, because you've got a really fleshed out character, they write themselves, and they demand attention. And I think it's the actor and your characters that you create. And the other thing too is, every scene, your characters are always fighting to win. And I always say that it's even looking at Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. They don't know that they're in for a disastrous end. So every scene they come in, they come in to win. And they're going to overcome these obstacles and they're going to win. So I think if your characters come in with that driving force, that even when everything's falling apart around them and everything looks like it's all just going really bad, they're still moving to win. And I've got two characters in Burning Mountain, aside from like trying to work out the history of the skull. I've got two characters that are also planning a crime, and and a very simple crime of just robbing a fish and chip shop, and how, like, what could go wrong, and everything goes wrong. And more than the reader could imagine what could go wrong with just trying to rip off a bag of money, and it just propels and gets worse and worse. But every step of the way is dramatic and dire and tragic and terrifying as every step goes. They're still fighting to win right to the very last breath. And even if it's, a moral win, even if they know that they're going to lose, they still in that last moment still want to win.
I love this. Honestly, I'm so glad I asked that question. This is the best answer I've ever had about characterization ever. It's like a masterclass on characterization. I love it.
Go take an acting course.
Absolutely brilliant. So good. Now, you've got to answer this for me, though, Darcy, because I do not understand this. You write comedy as well as jokes for others. What drew you to a life of writing crime instead of, resting on your laurels and writing something more lighthearted or funny?
It's such a good question. My background is writing also for the school magazine, so I write the classroom plays for the kids and that. And I've been directing. I work at a private girls' school as a drama teacher, so I direct the kids' plays, like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Roald Dahl, and musical theatres like Annie. And I've also been really fortunate to direct other plays at the State Theatre and down in Melbourne, and
Amazing.
Newtown and Seymour Centre. And I always thought, working with kids and doing drama, I was going to be a children's book writer. And
Oh,
I 100% thought, I know kids, I teach kids, I'm going to be a children's book writer. And every time I tried to break into the children's book, I just couldn't get in. And I didn't know whether I was too quirky, not quirky enough. And then we got into COVID, and I thought I just had Rebecca Giles just kept sitting in my head, and the story of Sticky Pete kept sitting in my head, and I've always loved murder documentaries, and I thought I'm going to have a crack. And there was the Penguin Literary Award, and I thought that's my deadline, so it gave me a goal. And I wrote The Fall Between, and it came time to submit it, and I nearly didn't.
oh,
I know. And I thought, oh, it's not literary, it's crime. And is it crime? Because it's a couple of like tongue in cheeky kind of moments. And then I thought, well, you've written it, you've got nothing to lose, just have a crack. And I put it in, and it got shortlisted in the top 6. And I didn't win, but I was still offered a contract. So I always say to authors and writers and aspiring writers, just to have a go. But there's another part that's annoyed. I'm like, oh, I spent all those years trying to break into children's books, and I was in the wrong genre. But I do think there's something really freeing about writing crime, that you can really, I think when you write crime, I like crime where you don't have a sociopath that just goes and does bad things for the sake of doing bad things because they're evil. I think I like digging deep, and I love it when you have normal people that the elements and the emotions and the situations are so compound that they react in ways that they stun themselves. But I want the reader to go, I don't condone what the character did, but I can understand it. And I think that is what is more magical, of how do people get themselves caught up in situations, and then how do they fight to get themselves out of the situation. And I think that becomes compelling reading, because
yes.
and I was talking to, I've been really fortunate to meet some homicide police detectives, and uh, and I've taken them out for dinner. And I always say to people, you got to be careful because one, they're expensive to take out. They like steak, and they don't drink their wine by the glass. They like it by the bottle. So take your money with you. And but we were there for probably about 3.5 hours, and even the waiter who was hanging around. He knew this is where the conversation was going down, and I wanted to pull him out of a chair and go, "I know, take a seat, right?" And he was doing anything to fill up our water or wipe our breadcrumbs, and I think we got a free basket of bread because I think he just wanted another reason. Like we'd eaten the bread, the crumbs were gone, and he was like, "More bread!" And but one of the things that they said to me that really hung and resonated was um, how surprising that really bad things can happen, and should all the stuff in the cooking pot have not been there at that moment, at that time, in that situation, that event may never have happened. and
Yeah.
and then the other thing that really resonated with me is they said the one emotion, because people think homicide is drugs, love, or money. And but they said what it is humiliation, that we cannot cope with. Like a drug lord cannot be humiliated. Someone leaving someone is humiliated. Someone not getting the inheritance or having to admit that they're bankrupt. And they said it is the emotion of humiliation. So I always say, exercise your resilient muscle and go touch grass. And, but they just said that humiliation is sometimes a breaking point. And I held on to that when I was writing Burning Mountain, of having that moment of, when you've been humiliated over and over and over again, that everyone has that snap. And
Yes.
and things are out of control. And also, a lawyer was saying, who had actually read The Fall Between, and said, "You have no idea how many times I've had ordinary people in court where even when they did something in their effort to try to undo something, they've made it even worse, and they could have only got off with these offences, but there's all these other offences tacked on because in their need to not be humiliated and caught out and lose their jobs and lose friendships and relationships because of their actions, they've actually dug themselves even deeper." And it's those kind of stories in life that I think, you know, we're human, and it's that beautiful human element that when you poke someone, and you poke your characters and you back them into a corner, sometimes they can write a story themselves for you. And
I know people are fascinating, aren't they? And their actions are fascinating. And second books are very different beasts from debuts too. And, Fall Between was shortlisted for 2 awards, the David and the Ned Kelly, which tells us what a fine book it was. But did you find the process very different this time around?
yeah, I tried. The awards hadn't been announced, so I didn't really feel that pressure. But I did abandon my first idea. I was sort of halfway through an idea, and I was like, this isn't. My editor and I were like, it's not touching the sweet spot. And I think it was an overcomplicated crime that the reader really had to focus on, and probably there was too much background knowledge that you needed to be able to make it make sense. So I shelved that. And it's terrifying when you look at something and it's like start again. And and I at the time I was really deeply, you know rattled by the idea of, oh no, I don't have a book and I should have something out. And I am so thankful now, because I would never have written Burning Mountain. And I'm just grateful that I ended up writing the book that I did.
Oh, that's great. And can you tell us what you're working on now?
Yeah, I think I like exercising my comedy muscle and crime, so I'm playing with a funny crime.
Oh,
And I know, and I'm also working on book 3 of Giles, because people want to know if she's staying in Musselbrook or not.
Yes, yes, you have to, because I kind of think that that's an important thing for readers to learn, like to have an end.
Yeah, I think it needs a resolution. I
Yeah.
think it needs that beautiful final of because her resistance to go to Muswellbrook, and at the end, does she call Muswellbrook her home, or does she return to Sydney and police in the city?
So, yeah, so just to put it simply, Darcy, you're continuing to be an overachiever by simultaneously writing two books.
I never thought. Yes.
Okay, Darcy does not do things by halves, folks. Oh
No,
my goodness.
that's so funny. The
You are not going to believe this. This is time on our interview. That is the fastest 30 minutes. Honestly, I could talk to you for hours.
Oh, thanks.
We will have to do that. I will have to come up to where you are and we'll go out for dinner. I will not order steak and I will not drink bottles of wine, but like the police detectives, but it'll be so much fun.
I would love to take you out for dinner for sure. Definitely hit me up, and that'd be great. And so, well, that's good. That's it then. So,
I
yeah,
just can't believe it. It was great. I'd like to thank our author, Darcy Tindale, for chatting with me and for being Reading by Candlelight's May crime thriller book box author. And for those of you who have not read Burning Mountain yet, it's an eerie, fast burning, no pun intended, story. It's so tightly packed with compelling characters and a mystery that's going to keep you all guessing. And I have to say that the short chapters make it impossible to put down. Do not take it to bed with you, you will not sleep. And that final reveal, Darcy, is truly climactic, very cleverly done. And I feel like our crime thriller readers are going to really enjoy their outing on Burning Mountain and have no doubt that they will all be asking at the end, like I am, where's the next book, Darcy?
yeah, that's true. I'm about 150 pages in, and so it's coming along nicely. But no promises on a release date, and certainly don't want my editor to turn around and go, let's start again."
Yes, no, let's not do that.
Do that. So, but yeah, so I'm excited about what next year I have to offer. So we'll watch this space.
Brilliant. I love that. Now, thank you all for coming along tonight and watching us live. If you are watching this on YouTube or listening to the podcast, I do hope you've enjoyed this episode. Let us know what you think in the Reading by Candlelight Facebook group or on socials. And thank you again, Darcy, for chatting with me.
Thanks.
I'm wishing everyone happy reading and goodbye until next month's Reading by Candlelight Book Club.